In 1978, the Chinese government announced a project so large that most of the scientists who heard about it assumed it was a political statement rather than an engineering plan. They were going to plant a wall of trees across the northern edge of the country, a living barrier stretching 4,500 kilometers from Xinjiang in the west to Heilongjiang in the east, designed to stop the advancing deserts of Central Asia from swallowing the farmland and cities to the south. The wall would not be built of stone, it would be built of roots, and it would take until the 2050s to finish. What happened in the years between that announcement and today is not the story of a plan that succeeded. It is the story of what happens when a government tries to fight a desert with trees, discovers that trees alone cannot fight a desert, and then has to learn at vast scale and considerable cost what a desert actually is. The desert that China was trying to stop has a name: the Gobi. It is a complex of desert and semi-arid grassland systems spread across 1.3 million square kilometers of northern China and southern Mongolia, expanding southward and eastward for reasons that are partly climatic and partly the accumulated consequence of centuries of land use. Overgrazing had stripped the grassland vegetation that held the soil in place. Agricultural expansion had broken the soil crust in areas where it should never have been broken. Groundwater extraction had dropped the water table below the reach of plant roots across vast stretches of the north. The result was a landscape in active erosion, generating dust storms that reached Beijing, crossed the Yellow Sea, and deposited fine particles as far away as California. In 2002, one dust storm darkened the sky over Beijing for 3 days. The dust was not a weather event. It was a symptom of a landscape that had lost the biological capacity to hold itself together. The 3 North Shelter Forest Program, which became known internationally as the Green Wall of China, was the government's answer to this. Plant trees across the northern and northwestern regions in a continuous belt, using the root systems and canopy cover to anchor the soil, reduce wind erosion, and gradually stabilize the landscape. The program had strong political support, abundant labor, and a simple metric for success: trees planted. Billions of trees were planted. By some estimates, more than 66 billion trees over the course of the program's first 4 decades. Satellite imagery from the early years of the program showed green spreading across areas that had been brown. What the satellite imagery did not show was what was happening underground. And what was happening underground was a problem that the program's designers had not adequately accounted for when they chose which trees to plant and where to plant them. The dominant species used in the early phases of the program was the poplar. Poplars grow fast. They establish quickly. They produce visible green cover in a short period of time, which made them attractive for a program that was measured by how much ground it covered and how quickly. But poplars are thirsty. In an environment where water was already the critical limiting resource, planting millions of poplars meant introducing millions of powerful water pumps into a landscape that could not sustain them. Entire plantations covering thousands of hectares turned gray and collapsed within a decade of establishment. The land they left behind was in some cases worse than the land they had been planted to protect, the soil disrupted and the surface crust broken by the planting process itself. The ecologists who had been raising concerns about the program since its early years had a term for what was happening. They called it green desertification. The trees were green before they died, but the process of planting them had accelerated the very degradation the program was supposed to reverse. By the early 2000s, internal assessments within the Chinese Academy of Sciences were documenting survival rates for planted trees in the arid northwestern regions of less than 15%. In some areas, the figure was lower. The program's reported success and its actual ecological outcomes had diverged in ways that were becoming impossible to ignore. The reckoning came slowly and then all at once. In 2008, a team of researchers published an assessment in the journal Science that drew on satellite data, field surveys, and mortality studies to argue that large portions of the green wall's planted area had failed or failing or were planted in environments so unsuitable that failure was effectively guaranteed. The assessment was not a rejection of the program's goals. It was an argument that achieving those goals required a fundamental rethinking of the methods. Trees planted in regions receiving less than 400 millimeters of annual rainfall, the researchers argued, were almost certain to fail without supplemental irrigation. And supplemental irrigation in a water-scarce landscape was not a solution. It was a displacement of the problem. The water used to keep planted trees alive in places they could not naturally survive was water drawn from aquifers and rivers that the surrounding ecosystem and the human communities depending on it could not spare. What happened in the 5 years after that assessment is what this story is actually about. Not 5 years from 1978, 5 years from the moment the program's leadership acknowledged at institutional scale that the strategy had to change. It was a gradual shift visible in the types of trees being planted, the locations being prioritized, the metrics being used to evaluate success, and the involvement of ecologists in decisions that had previously been made by foresters and engineers. The program began planting native species instead of fast-growing exotics. It began measuring soil health and water retention alongside canopy cover. And it began, in certain pilot areas, doing something that represented a genuine departure from the original model. It began letting the land decide what grew. In the Loess Plateau of northern Shanxi province, the change became visible faster than anywhere else. Restoration work on the plateau had begun in the 1990s under a program that combined terracing, check dams, and revegetation. In the early years, the revegetation component had the same problems as the broader Green Wall program: unsuitable species, insufficient water, high mortality. But by the mid-2000s, the plateau restoration teams had shifted toward native shrubs, grasses, and drought-adapted tree species, combined with grazing exclusion that allowed the existing seed bank in the soil to express itself. The results, tracked by satellite over the following decade, showed something that the program's designers had not anticipated. The vegetation was recovering faster in areas where the seed bank had been allowed to germinate than in areas where trees had been planted from nursery stock. The soil remembered what had grown there. It needed protection, not instruction. By 2015, satellite analysis of the LOESS plateau showed a greening trend that covered more than 25,000 square kilometers. Soil erosion rates had dropped by more than 50% in the most intensively restored areas. The Yellow River, which carries the plateau's eroded soil to the sea, and had been one of the world's most sediment-laden rivers for as long as records existed, showed a measurable reduction in sediment load. It was the result of planting the right things in the right places, protecting the soil long enough for its own biological processes to resume, and accepting that restoration operated on the ecosystem's timeline rather than the program's timeline. The Loess Plateau recovery became the model that the Green Wall program, in its reformed version, began trying to replicate across the North. The reformed program looked different from the original in ways that mattered. The emphasis on monoculture poplar plantations gave way to mixed native plantings that more closely approximated the structure of the original vegetation communities. Grazing exclusion zones were established across areas where livestock pressure had been the primary driver of degradation, giving the remaining soil biological community the chance to rebuild itself without constant disruption. In the driest areas where trees genuinely could not survive without irrigation, the program began acknowledging what ecologists had argued from the beginning, that grassland restoration, not tree planting, was the appropriate intervention. In the places where trees were dying and had always been going to die, grass became the tool. Wang Tao, a desert geographer at the Cold and Arid Regions Environmental and Engineering Research Institute in Lanzhou, had spent 2 decades documenting the expansion of China's deserts and the program's variable results across them. His assessment, published in a series of papers through the 2010 S, drew a distinction that had not been clearly made in the program's early framing. There was a difference, he argued, between halting desertification and reversing it. Halting required stabilizing the land surface, stopping the active movement of sand, preventing the further loss of soil that made future recovery possible. Reversing required rebuilding the biological communities in the soil, the microbial networks and root systems, and organic matter that allowed a landscape to retain water, cycle nutrients, and sustain vegetation across dry years as well as wet ones. The Green Wall, in its early form, had attempted to reverse without first halting. The reformed program began with halting, using native grasses and shrubs and windbreak structures to stabilize the surface, and then moved toward reversing only in areas where the soil biological community had recovered enough to support it. By 2022, the data from 3 decades of the reformed approach applied across the sections of the Northern Belt where the strategy change had been implemented earliest showed results that were measurable and, in some cases, dramatic. Dust storm frequency reaching Beijing had declined by more than 70% since the peak years of the early 2000s. The area of actively shifting sand dunes in northern China had decreased by more than 40% from the 1970s peak. Groundwater levels in some areas of the Low S Plateau had begun to recover, as reduced erosion and increased vegetation cover improved the infiltration of rainfall into the soil rather than its rapid runoff. Satellite-derived vegetation indices showed sustained greening across more than 500,000 square kilometers of northern China over the preceding 2 decades, a greening trend that independent analysis attributed partly to the restoration program and partly to changed land management practices in the surrounding agricultural areas. They were the numbers of a program that had failed at what it originally planned, learned from that failure at scale, and then rebuilt itself around a more accurate understanding of what a desert is and what it takes to stop one. The original Green Wall had tried to impose a solution on the landscape. The reformed program had begun in its most successful areas to listen to what the landscape was capable of doing on its own, and to provide the conditions under which it could do it. The difference between those 2 approaches is the difference between 66 billion trees planted and an ecosystem beginning to function again. There is a hillside in the Low S Plateau of northern Shanxi province that was photographed by a research team in 1995 and again in 2020. The 1995 photograph shows bare yellow Low S, deeply gullied without visible vegetation, the surface eroded to the subsoil across most of the frame. The 2020 photograph shows the same hillside covered in dense shrub and grass vegetation, the gullies partially filled with sediment that has been stabilized in place, the surface no longer eroding. The hillside did not recover because someone planted trees on it. It recovered because someone stopped the processes that were destroying it, protected the soil long enough for its seed bank to activate, and planted drought-adapted native species that the soil had the biological capacity to support. It recovered because the program learned, at enormous cost and over many years, the difference between a landscape that needs to be built and a landscape that needs to be allowed to rebuild itself. That distinction, learned across 4,500 kilometers of degraded northern China, is not a lesson that applies only to China. It is a lesson about what restoration means and what it requires, and it is one that every country planting trees to solve land degradation problems is still in the process of learning. Subscribe if this is the kind of story you come here for, and comment down below which ecosystem restoration story you think deserves this kind of attention. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.